Not a teaching problem. It's, again, a biochemical problem, maybe even a genetic problem.
Yeah, that's what I see in the school. It's if you can't sit down in that chair and keep your mouth shut, it has nothing to do with the fact that this is developmentally inappropriate for children to be expected to do. It's this child has got something wrong with him or her. And if this child can't sit still and seem motivated to these boring, force-fed tasks, we need to drug him or her because there's something wrong with them.
They're often our best and brightest kids. They're our most energetic kids, our most rebellious kids, our most exciting kids, the kids who may someday really transform the world and bring new and better things into the world. Well, those kids are always somewhat difficult. I mean, by definition, they're going to be a little more difficult, require more attention and more guidance and more love maybe than some other children. Well, these are the kids now that get diagnosed. And they're the kids who get drugged.
I have kids that will come to school some days and just be like, just staring at the ground. I mean, like someone took out the front part of their brain. And almost drooling. Kids just passed out. And I'll ask them, what's going on, man? What's up with you? They say, well, I changed meds. I got new meds. I'm adjusting to this.
Why is it that the U.S. has 6 times as many kids on Ritalin as any other country? Because this is the most profitable country to sell your drugs. Ritalin was originally made by a Swiss company. They couldn't get the Swiss to put their kids on it.
99 times out of 100, it's not a kid who is having a problem learning. Okay? They typically are bright kids, not necessarily, but typically bright kids that we're medicating. They are definitely energetic kids, kids that question, kids that argue with teachers. Big no-no. Don't argue with teachers. Don't argue with the source of wisdom. Don't argue with administrators. And we are lobotomizing these kids.
The markup is here. I heard a paper about a year ago. In all of France, there are only 8,000 kids on Ritalin and similar substances. In Lansing, Michigan, I'm sure we have many more than 8,000 kids on it. It's been an enormous marketing coup.
I think the question we have to ask, though, is this really 4 million kids that we're talking about? If you're talking about a temporary condition or a very small number of people, you might be able to make a case, but not 4 million. 4 million children and teenagers do not need Ritalin. They don't need these psychiatric drugs that we're seeing. And again, we have to ask, why the United States? Why do we account for 90% of all Ritalin prescriptions in the world?
There's virtually hardly any independent voice in regard to the effects of psychiatric medication. It's the voice of the industry that you hear no matter who's speaking.
There has been an enormous increase in marketing. We have direct TV advertising. We have the drug companies spend over $10,000 per doctor in the United States to push their products.
The only thing a psychoactive agent can do to a child's brain is disrupt it. That's why we're against having kids drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes. That's why we have very strict punishments for selling illegal drugs to children. Because we have a sense that there's something that should be inviolable about the growth and development of the child's brain. Yet we put toxins into their brains at extraordinarily high concentrations in the name of psychiatric treatment, so that our children's brains literally grow up adapting to a bath of toxicity. Now, often the initial psychiatric drug is the beginning of a lifelong dependence on psychiatric drugs, so the child will never become free.
What the medications typically do for almost everything, whether it's ADHD or depression or schizophrenia, is they improve the symptoms in the short run, and they make the patients more likely to be chronically disabled.
And that's the method of addiction, and that's why we are actually bringing up our kids to be psychiatric or street drug addicts when we give them these kinds of drugs as children. When you disrupt the brain in children, they become more apathetic, they become more docile, and they are more controllable for a while. Invariably, however, then their brain starts to fight back against the drugs, and often, if not really most of the time, the children become much worse, because now they're brain isn't functioning as well. They have less discipline, they have less self-control, they're less in touch with their feelings, they care less about other human beings, all the things that happens to people on drugs.
I think the most obvious effect is that zombie-like state that children get in when they start taking a stimulant. One of the things that I notice is that over the summer, a lot of the parents take their children off the stimulant. And over the summer, I feel like the children come back. You know, they're in my office and they're happy, they're giggly, they want to play, they're playful, they smile. And then in September, they come into my office and their affect is flat. You know, they don't want to do anything. They're apathetic. Hey, you want to go out and shoot some hoops? No. You know, I just immediately notice the child is taken out of them. It's like the sparks turned off. Some children can handle those conditions, and they're the kids that teachers like. They're the teachers' pets. They're the quiet, subdued, compliant children. Those are the children that they hold all the other children up as a standard of how you're supposed to act.
Harvey is the happiest boy in school. He likes to visit with his friends and say hello to everybody he passes. The other children and the teachers too like Harvey because being cheerful helps to make everyone feel better.
I'm actually not ADD. They thought I was because I'm just a little bit crazy, but I'm not. All it did was kind of get me high, I guess. It didn't really help. It's supposed to help me, but I feel normal without it, and I don't know, I hear it's not very good.
The stimulants cause depression, they cause anxiety, they cause obsessive-compulsive disorder, they stunt growth. Do not let the doctors lie about this. NIMH has just done a big study. They, for 5 years, withheld the data, and finally they let the data slip out from their latest study that the children are having loss of height and weight, not just weight. Now, how does this occur? The stimulants disrupt growth hormone rhythms. Growth hormone doesn't just control height and weight, it controls the entire growth of the body. Hardly anyone addresses that. So we're disrupting the growth of all the organs of the body, including the brain, by giving stimulants to our kids.
Stimulants flood the brain with dopamine. And if you keep doing that over time, the brain is going to stop producing that because it's trying to compensate for all this flood of dopamine. So what happens is the brain stops producing it and you become depressed. So that's another effect, is these children start showing signs of depression.
One of my friends, he, his mom caught him doing drugs once, and then his grades were really bad, so she assumed that there had to be something wrong with him. And so they did a bunch of tests on him and diagnosed him with ADD and put him on Ritalin, and now he's like extremely skinny and he doesn't eat right and he throws up, and it's just totally screwed him up, and his grades are even worse.
The kids never learn better, you know, they kind of scrawl their names, you know, they kind of get halfway through assignments and they lose their energy from it. And these are kids that used to be vivacious and energetic, you know, and bouncing off the walls and used to have a ton of opinions. Now they just sit there and stare at the floor, you know. So whose problem's getting solved there?
They can start showing signs of psychosis or nervous tics or Tourette's-like tics where they're constantly touching their face or moving their face. Or I worked with one little boy once that he became so consumed in nervous tics that he couldn't even go out in public without people staring at him.
And sometimes these tics become permanent. I remember a very handsome college student who came to me and his face was twitching. He'd been off Ritalin for years and years. He had a permanent twitch from these drugs.
Kids have to be put on more and more medication because of the side effects of the medication, and they're thinking it's the child's mental illness. And the parents are not educated. The parents go to these doctors and these psychiatrists and pediatricians thinking they're getting expert information, and really what they're getting is information that's just been handed down by the pharmaceutical companies. And groups like CHAD, which is a parents' organization to support the diagnosis of ADHD, they promote this ADHD fiasco.